This is the start of John's underside restoration on his E46 M3. Very good condition, Pheonix yellow, 38,000 miles. Just showing the signs of general wear and tear and surface corrosion underneath. It's got our transportation wheels on at the moment, so the customer's wheels are protected and bagged and stored. Already got some good components on there, the Turner rear arms and the HSD coilovers. So we're going to be doing the Redish Motorsport repair and reinforcement work on the rear axle carrier panel. And then every item is going to be individually taken apart, media blasted, powder coated in John's colour choice, wet lacquered on top. All new bushes, ball joints, wheel bearings, absolutely everything replaced, including fixings, nuts, bolts, speed clips, self-tappers, washers, everything genuine. All the way through to the front, so we're doing all the rear end, all this central end, decontaminating the floors of the factory wax, full floor colour protection, and all through to the front end, including the wheel arch liners, up into the... John keeps his car very clean already, so the arches are very good. It's just suffering from surface corrosion in certain areas, which has to be attended to. And we've got the common surface corrosion setting in on underside components. And we've already done some of the strip down work already, calipers removed, and he's on a set of our transportation wheels. I know we've just got little bits and areas, and it doesn't look like much, but those will all have to be attended to on the chassis leg. Any little area where there's a bit of surface corrosion has to be wire wheeled back to bare metal, and then specialist products like POR 15 metal prep will be used to neutralise the corrosion and give the metal an etching content so that the POR 15 black rust preventative paint will adhere to it. And then that will all be scotch brighted until the next layers. BMW sealer will be applied to replicate the areas where we have to take it off, like there, up around the trailing arm cradle, and just certain little brackets and things which are just suffering. There's a few more than we'd expect, but it's nothing that we can't sort out whilst everything is removed from the car. These are all the items we've taken off John's E46 M3 as part of the underside restoration progress, just showing the amount of attention to detail we go to with even the smallest brackets and components, rather than just the large items which are essentially very easy to do. This is the amount that the car gets stripped down to, laid out roughly on how a car would look from an overhead view. Now down at the front, we've got front springs, brake disc backing plates, the heat shield, anti-roll bar, kingpins, front controller brackets, front cross member. Then moving to the centre, we've got the exhaust, centre brackets, the fuel filter cover, the fuel tank straps, front controller bracket, body brackets, the gearbox cross member, then at the rear the V-brace, subframe itself, the subframe front bracket, top arms, no rear lower arms, no camber adjustable lighting, rear springs, trailing arm cradles, back plates, anti-roll bars, brackets, and exhaust mounts. We've got everything removed from John's E46 M3 now as part of the underside restoration process. So this is the similar sort of stage that we would strip a car down to do our normal repair and reinforcement process on the rear axle carrier panel. And we can see we've got the rear bumper here and the rear panel, so that's the floor area for the boot. And then we've got the rear axle carrier panel there with the 4 mounts, which are all got grease and contamination over them, mainly from the prop shaft, the diff and the CV joints that just leak grease and vapour over the years and go onto the floor. And that's the fuel tank area coming into view there. and then we've got the rest of the car there, transmission tunnel and the central floors. And this is where the fuel lines and the brake lines traditionally are. Brake lines are still installed, and we've moved the fuel lines at the moment there, and that is going to all be cleaned up with the wax to get all that factory wax off. And we need to do the decontamination first to get all this dirt, even though it doesn't look much. This is dust and dirt and debris, and then this is the worst stuff to get off. This is like a waxy content, a BMW wax that seeps out from the factory and then holds all the dirt over the years. And then once all the decontamination's done, then we'll start marking up with all the locations of the corrosion that we need to attend to before we can start the POR 15 corrosion preventative work. And this is the 4 subframe mounts before cleaning or working with them. This is as the subframe or axle carrier has come off, and we can see the mounts. You can see the bush impact marks where the energy from the bush has been pushing into the floor. We've got the start of a spot weld movement on this side, on the left front, then moving over to the right front. This is a more troublesome area. This one's got the traditional spot weld just starting to split there, and what appears to be the tiniest of hairline crack just trying to come out of there. Got a couple of other spot welds which have moved, and a little hairline crack around the actual mount there, where the pin, even though it's hard to imagine, that pin is actually twisted very slightly under torsional load. Then we've got the right hand side rear, which we can see the panels had some sort of movement and not necessarily coming away from the chassis, but we've got the factory MIG welds up in the corner which are corroded, which isn't very common, but we can attend to that. No cracks down in this area, although we're going to clean thoroughly and obviously inspect more once everything is decontaminated and cleaned up. And then going on to the left rear, where you get the common cracks down the left hand side fold here, that also does look good on first inspections, but again we'll see that further once we've cleaned. And then we've just got one spot weld in the folded lip here by the shock absorber, which has just started to, well, it has popped, which is where we got the corrosion ring from. We're now in the right rear wheel arch of John's E46 M3. That's where the fuel filler would come through. And we've just been cleaning the arches. Done some tyre scrubbage there obviously, which will be attended to. But you can see John keeps his car very clear already, but we've just been using a toothbrush on every sort of square centimetre of the of all the areas which aren't normally accessible, just to try and get as much contamination out of the grain of the sealer as possible. Some of these are tar spots from the tyres flicking up, so those will get attended to next. But the arches are extremely clean. So much so that clean gloves can squeak all the way along with nothing on when you remove. Here you can see we've done the decontamination stage on the right hand side of the car, which is now cleaned free from grease, dust, debris, all sorts of wax contaminants, which we need to do first before we can start any processes of searching for cracks, spot weld issues, corrosion, so that we don't contaminate our findings basically on the next sort of metal working stage. You can see the left hand side is dirty, greasy and dusty. When you compare that to the right hand side, and all this is done by hand, no mechanical tools to clean this. This is just toothbrushes, microfiber cloths and evaporating spirits to clean up as much dirt as possible, so then we can carry out our inspection of the corroded areas and any subframe issues thoroughly. This is the underside of John's E46 M3 now that it's been degreased. This is all done by hand, using evaporating spirits, microfiber cloths and toothbrushes. It's all into the wheel arches, boot floor section, rear axle carrier panel, all around the subframe mount points that we're going to be reinforcing, around the trailing arm pockets, above the fuel tank and the transmission tunnel, on the fuel line and brake line areas where the factory wax was covered and so dirty, all over the floor, pans and the chassis legs and side skirt areas, and then moving forward right up into the front wheel arches as well. So now we're just going to mark all the locations that have got surface corrosion, mainly around the little brackets, like those fuel tank brackets and the brake pipe brackets there, and around the spring perches, just on the edges of things where the factory E-coat's been knocked over the years or rubbed and corrosion's just starting to set in. Nothing appears structural, it's all just surface, but it needs to be attended to before we can start our rust preventative measures with the POR15 products. So we'll start wire wheeling all this back to bare metal now, where the damaged sealer is or the E-coat problems, get rid of the corrosion, and then we'll start neutralising that then. We've now wire wheeled all the bad corrosion and sealer on the underside of John's E46 M3 and assessed it very accurately after it's all been degreased, right from the arches and the inner lips all the way to the rear panel, all the way through the rear axle carrier panel, the fuel tank storage area, into the rear trailing arm pockets, the jacking points, the seal mounts, and through the central sections, the tunnels, the floors, and into the front wheel arch areas and chassis legs. And that coloured hue is the infrared lamps that we've got under here, just drying the remnants of the POR15 metal prep off, which has been washed, because now the areas have been wire wheeled. Anything that did have corrosion or sort of an issue with any sealer, for instance around the rear trailing arm pockets, where we've taken back to bare metal, we've treated it with the POR15 metal prep, or prep and ready as it used to be called, and right into the jacking points as well. There's a jacking pad there, and that's where the V-brace bolt would be. Lots of corrosion likes to sit under there, so all that sealer's been dug out and then feathered edged. And although the colourings on this camera aren't very good because of the infrared, every last little bit of area where there was some sort of corrosion marker or sign has been attended to and then neutralised for 30 minutes to neutralise the corrosion and build an etch for the POR15 rust preventative paint. And that's now been washed off and it's just drying before we start the process of painting the POR15 rust preventative paint. This is the POR15 first coat before the reinforcement plates are done on this underside restoration. So where we've neutralised the areas, we've now coated our first layer. I'm afraid it's a little bit dark here, but if you've ever used POR15 before, you know how self-leveling and glossy it finishes, and also how durable, that in fact it won't scratch with your nail or come off in any way. It would have to be mechanically removed, which makes it the item of choice for us. So those are areas where we wire wheeled that we had corrosion have all been attended to and protected, right up into the trailing arm pockets as well, and then going down the central chassis leg areas, anywhere where there's a seam or a lip or somewhere which is going to be a risk in the future of water collection, and the chassis legs up into the transmission tunnel, and then up into the front corners as well. We've finished the reinforcement plate work now, and the reinforcement plates have been welded on and flushed back, although it doesn't look like there's anything there. You can just about see our markings on the plate, and you can see the weld bead line. And so that's the left front, that's the right front, those are the spacer plates, That's the right rear, and that's the left rear, and then the seams where they have the spot weld cracking problem, where we take the sealer off and carry out the stitch weld to strengthen those corners. Then we've painted them with Por 15 paint, just like the rest of the floor on the corroded areas, and that's dried as you'd expect, quite glossy and self-leveling and very resilient to any scratching or any problems. Very, very strong paint. And then we've used BMW's seam sealer and in small thin quantities, and brushed that around any edges or seams or anywhere where we know we've taken sealer off or that we'd like to seal from any water in the future if anything was to splash, which is very unlikely, but it's just nice to know that what we've taken off has been reapplied. And plus, using the BMW seam sealer, it's very strong, has to be mechanically removed, and will do the job better than any sort of cheaper alternatives. And we've done Por 15 as well on the inner wheel arches after those were all cleaned, and also in the rubbed contact areas that you might have seen on earlier in the video, where the tyres were contacting when the car had larger spaces, but they've now been removed. And then we've carried out the mask procedure throughout the car, all on the front, all on the side. The entire car is masked. And then we also did create a separate sort of drop-down mask system to give us a sort of a makeshift spray booth. Engine and gearbox are masked, all the front end, front bumper, and extensively gone through the car and masked the areas that we don't want any paint to get to. We've just topped up the seam sealer where we've taken it away on any little edges, like near the jacking points that had surface corrosion. And that's looking back at the gearbox there. You see the chassis legs. The black is the Por 15 and then the grey is the seam sealer. And now we're pretty much ready for the high build primer now. So we've done the high build etch primer, and that's what we're looking at now. Just finished drying with the infrared lamps underneath, which is just turned off. So that's looking at the boot floor area there, up to the rear valance, into the left rear wheel arch and the spring perch and the reinforcement plates that you can clearly see now, over to the right wheel arch, into the spring perch, and then into the fuel tank area. The shadows make it look like it's not painted, but in actual fact they are. It's shadowing. And then it's going right down the central sections. Again, we've got shadow in, but I can assure you that is painted. Into the transmission tunnel, around the top of the gearbox, felt matting, down to the fronts, and then up into the front wheel arch area, and in the left hand side as well. That's all been covered. And now we're going to be doing the actual colouring, the Pheonix yellow. This is some of the cleaned plastics, ready to go back on John's car, fuel tank and all the pipe work, all the plastic under trays, carbon canister, fuel expansion tanks, fuel filler necks, fuel vent pipes, fuel pipes itself, stainless steel, so those clean up fine. Lots of other items not pictured here that are just drying at the moment. They've been hand painted, like the differential casing, the drive shafts, the brake pipes, been Por 15'd, all these items. So they're smooth, strong, durable, black in colour, and the power steering high pressure pipes have been painted as well. And then this moves on to the collection of BMW items, which is mainly all the consumables. Pretty much every single item that you can buy for this, all the components that we've taken off, not much there. Don't mind telling you that in BMW parts alone there, just from what's in that picture right there, there's about £1,000 worth of consumable nuts and bolts and fixings. Even just the different versions of copper nuts, some of those are about £3 each. As you know, if you buy BMW bits, they are very good, but sometimes pricey when you accumulate nuts, bolts, fixings and washers to this scale. And then we move on to the larger items up here. These are the front control arms, genuine BMW, along with the front tie rods, genuine BMW. Full PowerFlex bush kit, so subframe bushes, trailing arm bushes aren't pictured in this. Front control arm bushes, anti-roll bar bushes, diff bushes. And then trailing arm ball joints here. That's new BMW sealant made by Loctite for the diff. Heat shield for the left front subframe bush. Rear drop links, front hubs, wheel bearing hubs, and BMW wheel bearing kits for the rear. The powder coating process is now finished, and we've unwrapped everything, laid it all out, and just going to show you what we've had powder coated. Probably the largest amount of items we've had done so far on an E46 M3. Customer has chosen slate grey and Kawasaki green, and then the black is a high temperature satin black, which is for the exhaust system. There's 42 items in slate grey, 9 in Kawasaki green and 3 in high temp satin black. So we've got in the grey, we've got things like on the left hand side we've got the rear trailing arm pocket cradles, fuel tank straps, gearbox cross members, front kingpins, fuel filter cover, front diff cross member, lots of individual small brackets and pieces, rear disc backing plates, V-brace, top arms, trailing arms, lollipop bushes, anti-roll bar brackets, exhaust brackets, and then the front under tray, aluminium under tray. And in the Kawasaki green, over on the right, we've got the diff carrier itself, the diff cover, front and rear anti-roll bars, coil springs, and the front subframe or front cross member. And in the high temp black, we've got the front cat section, then the middle section, and also a very small exhaust flange over there as well. And these items are media blasted first, then they're powder primed to level out any imperfections as best as possible, then colour application, which is actually powder coat, and then they'll be wet lacquered on top. So there's 3 layers of protection. Does help with the gloss effect and also durability. This gives you an idea of the thickness of the powder coat, the 3 stages that we go through. These are some of the bolts that are used to seal up the threaded holes in the items before they get blasted or powder coated, and we all know what a thread looks like. You can see this grey bolt here at the end of the thread is exposed, and you know you've got a good 1-2 millimeter dip in down into the shank of the bolt. And then the powder coat, you see how the thread disappears slowly as the powder coat has been applied to almost near the head or the shoulder of the bolt, where there's not much thread at all because the powder coat's of a thickness, same with on this green one here, that it covers and almost levels out. Once the high build primer had finished drying, then we carried out the Pheonix yellow base coat colour, which has been successful. And then once that's dried with infrared lamps, then we've carried out the lacquer clear coat on top. And it's winter here in the UK, so the daylight has already gone, so I'm showing you this with a torch, so it's not as bright as it would be in a natural daylight, but you get the idea. And there will be shadows again, but it's because I'm working with a torch on this video. I can assure you everywhere has been covered and it has fully been checked. So just go a bit closer. We can see we've got the reinforcement plates here, our own branded Redish Motorsport ones. And just do a quick walk round into the wheel arch. We've done an initial demask. We've still got the car masked for added protection, but we've just done a first demask and check our colour match and blend lines. You can see this arch where we haven't painted and we've peeled the masking tape away. Pretty much an exact match, so very, very happy with the finish. The result on this. Moving through into the fuel tank area. Rear trailing arm pockets. Transmission tunnel. It's not normally painted on a car, it's just got an E-coat on it, but we like to do it. I'm going to do a better video in the daylight tomorrow as we're starting assembly, just to show you some natural light colours. We try everything with an infrared lamp, like that. I can tell you that's extremely, well, hot's the wrong word, that would worry people. It's very warm, so it does the job. You can see there where we go up to, into the horizontal with the chassis leg. Then we've got the wheel arches in the front. And all down the central sections and chassis legs have all been painted too. You'll also notice in that last video what may seem like sloppy work by leaving the jacking pads in isn't in reality. That's what we use to lift the vehicle off of the ramp pads, and these all get changed as part of the underside restoration. We're actually very careful in what we mask up and take off. You can see there's no paint on the wiring. These have all been masked before the paint application. So even though those are over painted, they'll be changed. Partway through the installation now, and we've got some natural daylight on the subject, so we can see the colour in better light, and it's obviously changing with the angle of the phone that we're using here. But all the brake pipes have been pour 15'd, and all the stainless steel fuel lines have been cleaned. Everything's all new clips, every single clipping point and cover is all new, all the way around the back of the fuel tanks, all OEM locations, up into the left caliper area where it's going to connect to the flexi hose above the axle. The blue one is the fuel vent pipe which goes to the carbon canister up there, and the brake pipe that goes over to the right point for the flexi hose. Then that allows us to install the fuel tank, which we've done there. Black plastic fuel tank which has been thoroughly cleaned, degreased, dewaxed, protected. Powder coated fuel tank straps, stainless steel washers, new bolts and fixings, and you can see there we got the first part of the green on, which is the rear subframe with the yellow Powerflex bushes, the black front Powerflex diff bush, all new fixings, nickel anti-seize paste is used on all the threads, and then on the front end we've also been doing some work as well. We've supported the engine on the front and allowed us to take the front lower crossmember off and install the powder coated item, along with the cleaned steering rack with the new bolts and nuts, high pressure steering pipe and return pipe from the rack and to the rack have been removed, cleaned, and pour 15 on the metal items, and then the rubber's been protected. Genuine BMW arms and Powerflex front control arm bushes, and what we call the lollipop brackets in slate grey, and also the BMW tie rods as well, with all new clips all lined up the same way, same angle, with the rubbers all cleaned. Partway through now, the upper and lower arms are on, installed and torqued. Turner Motorsport camber arms. And all the fuel expansion tank and filler neck is all installed. Fuel line, fuel filter. And moving up to the front, we've got the front subframe arms, anti-roll bars now on, and the tie rods, the kingpins, vacuum plates, AP calipers, HSD coilovers, the original drop links. So John's E46 M3 is all finished, back together, torque checked and paint marked. Every single item of hardware has been powder coated, refurbished, heat shields and under trays cleaned, scrubbed. Every bush, ball joint, wheel bearing been replaced for new, and along with every fastener, consumable clip, all new from BMW, stainless where possible. And obviously the floor has been fully degreased, corrosion scrubbed, attended to, corrosion neutralised, pour 15s, primered, seam sealed, Pheonix yellow base coat, and then lacquer top coat as well. Even the exhaust is powder coated with a high temp satin black. And John chose to go into the front as well, so we've carried out the front underside restoration as well. Genuine BMW arms and tie rods, kingpins powder coated, John's AP brakes, new wheel bearing hubs, all the wheel arch liners were removed, all new fixings. Even new jacking pads there on the side of the seals and the centre.